Hello. Thank you so much for being with us. This is Lisa Schafer. She is my sweet, wonderful friend, and I am so excited to have her here, joining us to share about her life and her experiences and just encourage you today. Okay, so Lisa,
I'm
tell
excited.
us who you are and about your family and about
Mm.
what you do.
Okay, so how long is the podcast? How much time do we have? So, okay, well, I am Lisa Schafer. I live smack dab in the middle of Kansas. I am a 25-year homeschool veteran. I homeschooled three children from kindergarten through high school. Some of them graduated later than planned, some of them graduated sooner. They were all three very, very different people. I have always been an entrepreneur from the time that my kids were born. We launched a commercial janitorial cleaning business, and it has kept us afloat for 32 years. That's what we've had going. It's always been a side hustle. My husband's always worked full time somewhere, and a lot of times I worked part time somewhere and kept the cleaning business going just because it kept all the bills paid without us having to be away from home too much. So, what else have I done? I just recently became a writer, which was a brand new thing. I was working part-time in healthcare and just felt like the Lord was telling me to come home and start writing my story. And in the midst of all of that, I asked him, okay, where do I start? And we started, do I talk about the infertility and the adoption process? Do I talk about my own experiences with alcohol and drugs back in the 80s before you were born? Do I talk about building a business and being an entrepreneur? I just had all of these things.
Mhm.
And the Lord said, I want you to tell people where I have redeemed you the most. And that was in my ability to forgive my father for abandonment and the abuser that hurt me when I was 4 years old. So I started writing about a Bible study about those things. And now I have two. One is called Discarded, A Daughter's Journey to Reclaim Freedom and Forgive the Father Who Left Her Behind. Oh, I actually have them. Here's one.
Yeah, let's see them.
Let's say, aren't they pretty?
Uh-huh.
A Daughter's Journey to Reclaim Freedom and Forgive the Father Who Left Her Behind. And then, as that one was gaining some popularity in some small groups, people began to ask me for a Bible study that addressed the same issue of needing to forgive, but from the perspective of being abused. And that's when this one was born, which is the Christian Victim's Guide to Forgiving the Unforgivable, a biblical journey to break the bondage of bitterness. So, those two Bible studies launched a podcast, and so now I do the Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen, which is Christian Drama Queen Solutions back there. And then that launched a mentoring program. So now I help women facilitate freedom and walk through that process in the Bible study. So so that's who I am right now. So that's what I'm doing today. Now, if you ask me
Yeah.
tomorrow, it might be something else.
We'll
But
see, right? Yeah.
today.
God's journey is always so interesting where we're like, I have these plans, but we'll see what he says. We'll see what we
Man,
do.
man makes his plans and God directs his steps. And it might be
Absolutely.
that God directs your steps to a different plan. So that's
Yeah.
good.
Yep. Yep.
So,
Yep. Yep.
but
Yeah. It's a good place to go. Okay. So let's talk about earlier in your life, whenever you were running a business, homeschooling three kids, working part time, your husband was working full time, doing all this stuff, right? How did you do that without losing
oh,
your mind? Even if you did sometimes, I mean, you obviously handled it well enough, you all made it out. Like,
well, let's see. Well, yeah, we're all alive. We all made it. So to be quite honest with you, when I look back, then if I when I look back on those years, because the last year I homeschooled would have been 2016. That was when we were done. And I say done, and then COVID hit, and I homeschooled my granddaughter. So, but while I was trying to juggle all of those things, if I look back, I have to think, man, I just wasn't really very good at it because I didn't enjoy as much as I could have. You know,
Mhm.
um, there always seemed to be that burden of making sure I showed that I was doing enough, whether it was keeping on track with the kids and making sure they stayed on grade level and they weren't behind and all of those kinds of things, which was interesting because all of them, they're all three adopted and they all came with baggage. And so we dealt with a lot of different things during their youth.
Mhm.
Um, but I didn't feel like I was doing it very well. However, we did survive. We, excuse me, when you ask my kids now about their homeschool years, they'll give you some good memories. They'll give you, my oldest son says, maybe you didn't give us everything you thought we needed to have, but you sure showed us how to find it. And so he's right. That was really, I focused primarily on not making sure there were no gaps, but making sure that they were never bored. I didn't want them to hate learning. And so
Yeah.
there were a lot of times that we just tossed the planner aside and focused on what they were interested in. And then I worked it into the planner. So, but I did have to use a day timer, and focus on that. I let my businesses, my little entrepreneurial excursions, and there were quite a few little entrepreneurial excursions. When I decided to stay home, which is an interesting story, the way the cleaning service got started, which I talk about in my podcast, we just quit. I just quit my full-time job on faith and said, okay, Lord, you're going to have to provide me with $1,102 so I can stay home. And it was exactly $1,102. So I gave notice on a Friday. We told everybody at church I had quit and that the Lord was going to have to provide. On Monday, somebody contacted my husband where he was working, which was full-time at Cessna Aircraft. And she said, I've got this little cleaning business. I don't want to manage it anymore. Just a few clients. Would you and your wife be interested? She didn't even know we had given notice that I was going to be home. He said, well, yeah, we would be interested in it. How much money does it make? She said, $1,104.
Little buffer there.
And that business has been going strong for 32 years. And now we're in six figures. But it was just, we weren't planning on having a cleaning business. So I wasn't really planning on being an entrepreneur. I thought maybe I'd do Tupperware or sell cosmetics or something
Yeah.
so I could be home with the kids. But the cleaning business came along and it's been making sure I could stay home with my kids ever since. There were a lot of times that we didn't grow it. We purposely had to say, okay, we're maxed out as far as time. We're maxed out as far as energy. And then there were other times where we went, if we picked up this really good sized client and hired a couple of people, they could maybe take some of the burden off of us.
Hmm.
Except, of course, then I had to learn how to do payroll, which is a whole nother podcast. So,
I get that. Yes.
and so I just had to prioritize, and it was daily. I mean, it was like this fire is bigger than this one, so we're going to put this one out today. Or this has to be done at a certain time that can carry on to the next week. So I'll do
Hmm.
this one. So I did a lot of just adjusting. I have recently found that block planning is a godsend.
Yes.
And what I do now is when those little fires come up and they're in the middle of something that I've got blocked out for something else, I move the
Hmm.
whole block. And that way I still keep it on the planner and I can still put out the fire.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been doing is recently, but we didn't have the technology that we have now to do all of this stuff. I didn't have a Google calendar on my computer and we certainly didn't have the internet. I mean, that's insane. You mean I can talk to people face to face? That's crazy. On the computer? It's like the Jetsons. It's great.
It is.
It's very, very and oh, or Star Trek. Maybe people don't know what Jetsons are, but we did. I'm so old, right? So I just didn't have everything was written down. It was all on paper, the planner and the calendar and all that was in front of me. And for me, the greatest tool for the homeschooling and then the cleaning business and then my other entrepreneur, because I'm a serial entrepreneur, it's like an addiction for me. Those things, the key part of all of those was to have my own systems in place to make them run. And
Hmm.
so the planning that I did for the cleaning business was different than the planner that I used for school. I did not have everything in one calendar. That to me was like I would put the personal calendar on the refrigerator, and then I had one on my desk for my business, and then I
Hmm.
had a school planner, which was not timed. The school planner was not timed. It was just here's a list of things that we're going to do today. And
Yep.
so, you had 3 grades at, any one time. So I think some of the stuff that helps is things like unit study approach if you're a homeschooler, because you can teach all the grades with one top in one subject. at the same time. Have you ever heard of that? So,
Mm-mm.
so I'll use for an example World War II. So when we study World War II, we'd pick a book, some sort of children's book, usually some sort of Newbery Award winning book, something with a good, strong moral, good art, and with lots of interesting things in it. So we take that book, I'd read it with all three kids. And then the things that we would select for them to do as far as activities or social studies or science would be based on their grade level, but they would pertain to that story. And that
Wow.
way they could make a connection with the subjects and the story. And so even when they read that story today, my daughter will tell you she was 4 years old when she learned about the Great Wall of China because we were doing the story of Ping. And so she remembered the story about Ping, what we learned about the Great Wall of China, and she spouted it off to anybody that would listen. And she's 30 years old and she still remembers today every
That's
time she
amazing.
sees that book, right? So,
Hmm.
schooling for me was a whole lot different than what I think a lot of people do for school. I did not recreate the public school system in my home. Felt like
Yep.
it was a failing system. And so we didn't do textbooky, workbooky, an hour science, an hour math, an hour history. We didn't do it that way. And I think that's why the kids still remember the stuff that we did and enjoyed it. We did a lot of lap booking. I have a lap booking Facebook group
All right.
that I show people how to do that stuff. So we just I think we were not the norm, but I
Hmm.
did block time out for the things that needed to be done. And then if the priority got shifted, I had to be flexible.
Yep.
And then I couldn't beat myself up about it. You can't you can't beat yourself up. Oh man. I had three children. Okay. I had friends with 8 and 9 and 10,
Yeah.
which is those people deserve awards, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to set aside a day for them to celebrate them because homeschooling kids like in that kind of setting. But here's what I found. The big ones help the little ones.
Hmm.
It became a everything was a family endeavor. And so they learned responsibility at a younger age, probably than some, but they also had to figure out how to make relationships work. And so that to me, that's pretty important, being able to make relationships work with people because we have a whole generation and almost two of people that struggle to do that. They don't know how to make
Hmm.
relationships work. So yeah, prioritizing and then not beating yourself up when things aren't perfect because comparison is the death of contentment. Don't do it.
Yes, absolutely. That's great. That's great. So if you were with a mom of some young kids, 1, 3, 7, I don't know how many they have. I guess they won't all be young if they have seven, but still,
I have a friend who's got three, all under three.
that's true. Okay, it is
So
possible.
it does happen.
It does happen, but and they either are in the middle of homeschooling or they want to start homeschooling.
Mhm.
What encouragement would you give them, and where would you tell them to start so that they don't feel like overwhelmed and then
Mhm.
worrying about and they don't get burnt out really quickly because there's a lot of information. You're right. When you were doing this, there wasn't the internet, but now the internet
Mhm.
is telling everybody what they need to
Right.
be doing, and all of it's different. So there's a
Yeah.
lot that we could read and know. So what would you tell her?
Well, I would say, first of all, take a really deep breath because everybody has to establish their own ideal. So, our ideal homeschool was a place where we could teach God's word and history from God's word and apply it to world history because it is a part of history. And so that was important to us. We wanted to have the freedom to teach Christian concepts without the argument about whether or not this and that and the other was true. Did we teach other viewpoints? Yes, we did. Some homeschoolers do not. But I wanted my children to be able to say and choose for themselves why they believed which way, right?
Mhm.
And so we did teach different viewpoints on things like science and whatnot. But when you have littles, first of all, most our state did not force us to even report that we were going to be homeschooling our kids until they were 7.
Oh, wow.
So didn't have to go to preschool, didn't have to go to kindergarten, and didn't have to go to first grade. And all of a sudden, then we could tell them, yes, we're going to keep them home and homeschool them. And even then, we didn't give our children's names. We just named our school. So it's real important to know what's required by your state, not what's required by some association or umbrella school or any of that. Just find out what's required by your state where you're at. Number 2, become a member of Homeschool Legal Defense, because HSLDA will protect you in the event somebody tries to push you when it comes to what you're doing in your school. So if you know the laws, and Homeschool Legal Defense is on your side. So the moment somebody comes to your door and says, and this is what most people are afraid of, somebody's going to show up at my door and tell me that my kids are out of school, they're truant, and they're going to take my kids. Okay. Doesn't happen as often anymore because so many more people are homeschooling. However, when you're young and you're new, that's the fear. I'm not going to do it right and they're going to take my kids.
Mhm.
Become a member of HSLDA. And then as soon as someone comes to the door, you hand them that card. And then it's between them and HSLDA because that's your attorney and they'll represent you. Okay.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay.
It's very, and I think I paid $9 a month. Of course, that was a long time ago. I don't know what it costs now, but I'm telling you, it was never needed. I never needed it. But I knew that if I ever did, no big deal. And
Okay.
they were winning court battles all over the country and, in fact, in other countries
Wow.
to help families. So that took a huge load off of me. I never had to worry if, they were gonna, and I already felt like under suspicion because back then I had 3 adopted children. It's like being under the scrutiny of Child Protective Services all the time because people know they're not your biological kids. And so, but so that those are 2 things that take a deep breath, know your laws, and become a member of HSLDA. The other part of that is take some time to look at different styles of education. So, for example, there are some great curriculums out there. My Father's World has an entire curriculum. Abeka, Bob Jones University, which used to just be private Christian school curriculum. There are all kinds of different ways and to do school. You have to look at the kind of person you are, and you have to look at the kind of children you have. So I have 3 extremely different children. I had to be an eclectic teacher. I had to do a lot more conversation-based something with this one and a lot more hands-on using all the senses. Let's be real kinesthetic teaching with this one. And with the other one, he could just sit down and memorize rote work. He didn't care if it was fun or not. He just get it done, be done, and go out and jump on the trampoline. He was done. So you just have to know your kids.
Okay. Mhm. Yeah, no,
So,
good advice.
and because there are some fantastic curriculums out there that are costing thousands of dollars. And I'll be honest with you, back then in my day, I spent $25 for the curriculum for unit studies. We checked out all of the books that we needed from the library, and I bought some craft supplies. We
Yeah.
did not have it. The scope and sequence in that particular curriculum, by the way, is 5 in a row. If you've got littles, I highly recommend looking at the unit study approach with 5 in a row.
Okay.
And you can incorporate several grades at once. But it was the scope and sequence in Encyclopedia Britannica was what was used to build it. So it's not like you're gonna miss out on anything.
Mhm.
And it's $25 and it's reusable.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I highly recommend unit study approach, know the laws, HSLDA, be a member of HSLDA, and know yourself and your kids.
Mhm.
Because when you start looking at curriculum, it can be crazy. If you go to a homeschool convention, don't.
Don't okay.
Be- Because they're all great. Everything there is great. It's
Yeah.
all wonderful. I think you're better off to find a homeschool mom in your area, in your church, maybe in a homeschool co-op in your city. And just say, can I just ask you some questions? Come look at what you're doing, see if it's something that I could do.
Mhm.
I think you're much, much better off because they'll give you the ins and outs, good or bad,
Yeah.
about what it is that they do or the curriculum they're using. I am complete. I'm gonna get in trouble. I am completely against um, thinking that we have to do an entire curriculum from cover to cover. um, I started teaching my kids at home with the idea that we'd be able to focus on what they wanted to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when we went through World War II, we spent far more time on it than my curriculum said to do
Yeah.
because my son got completely enthralled with aeronautics. And I wasn't about to tell him at age 13, okay, stop looking at that.
Right.
We got to go on to something else.
Mm.
He was enthralled. He wanted to look at different kinds of planes. He started to look at helicopters. He began to, then it went into military training. And then it was, we just went, he just, because education is not about filling a bucket of information. It's about lighting a fire.
Yes.
And once
Absolutely.
his fire was going, I wasn't going to put it out.
Right.
So finally, at one point, he took the posters down of all the airplanes and said he was ready to do something else, you know?
Okay. That's perfect.
Right? So now we're talking about hunting, you know? It was
There you
just,
go. Why not? I love it. That's perfect.
so
Yeah.
I want I want these young moms that have this high standard in their mind of what it's supposed to look like. You'll
Mm.
kill yourself trying to have the perfect kids.
Yeah.
And they'll end up resenting the education instead of enjoying it.
Yeah.
So
Definitely
it's
don't want
just
that. That's why you don't have them in public schools. You want them to like it.
yeah, the whole point is that they love education
Mhm.
and they love learning. I it drives yeah, yeah, anyway. So,
It's very, all of that was really encouraging, especially the part where you're talking about the curriculum and how you didn't spend a ton of money and you went into the library and you didn't have a lot of stuff. And like, we all know that the internet is not a real place, right? But we do see like all of these homeschool people who are selling their own curriculum or are influencers in the world, doing affiliate, like, good for them, man, make the money. But it makes a lot of people feel like I have to have like 400 things in my house to
no.
have a good
No.
homeschool
Listen,
life.
if your kid, and this has been true, I've seen this true over and over again. If your children read or you read to your children, they'll be good spellers, they'll be
Mm,
good writers, and they'll enjoy learning. Now, not if you, read Dick and Jane books all the time. Let's honestly, let's do something entertaining. But
right.
introduce them to good, strong literature,
Mhm.
classic literature, and they'll become good writers. They'll recognize setting. They'll recognize the right kind of descriptions in their own writing. They'll begin to who needs to decipher what is it we used to do with the sentences? What do they call that? Mapping them out where you'd have the
Yeah,
little
something like that.
diagramming. We're going to diagram these sentences. That never made me a better writer. That just made me hate paper and pen. That's what that did. But if man, the learning is in the stories. How did Jesus
Mhm.
teach?
Stories.
Parables.
Yep.
That's how he taught. Kingdom
Yep.
of heaven, the whole idea about money, loving your neighbor, even forgiving, all of that stuff was in stories.
Absolutely.
And so I think that we forget how incredibly educational a good book can be. I remember my son was doing Lord of the Rings. He was reading Lord of the Rings. I think he was 13 or 14 at the time.
Okay.
And so, of course, when I asked him about how I was enjoying the book or was there some things he said, there's some stuff in here that makes me think about the Bible. So I taught him what an allegory was, then he
Yeah.
was what we were reading was an allegory. But then he wanted to know about other allegories and see if he could figure out what they were pointing to. See?
Mhm.
So, we just forget sometimes about how easy it is for them. They're born curious.
Yes.
They're born curious. So if they want to go outside and play in the dirt and find bugs and chase the chickens, let them.
That's like our whole life. I have a 2-year-old. We got
Let
chickens
them.
and bugs galore. It's
You just let
a
them.
good time.
You just let them. You have a good
Yep.
time. Yeah, because first of all, it's gonna go fast. It's
Yeah.
gonna go fast. I've got 4 grandkids. How does that happen? But my kids have learned. My oldest, who's got he's got 3 and he's got 2 little girls at home and he's like, we're gonna homeschool. And he remembers. They go out to the creek every day, play in the creek, find flowers, pick up leaves. They press their own little bookmarks. They do it. She's 4,
Yeah.
but she's curious now. And the baby goes with him, but she's only 1. She doesn't really care yet.
Yeah. But, but she's there.
She will.
She will.
And what's really funny is what I'm already seeing when I watch those girls. My 4-year-old granddaughter plays teacher with her
Oh,
sister.
that's sweet.
And it's obvious that she's catching on that every moment's an educational moment, right?
Yeah. That's
So,
so good. That's so good. So as you were homeschooling and running your business, how did you prioritize your relationship with Christ while balancing all these demands? What did that
mhm.
look like?
Well, again, I look back and I realize I wasn't really very good at it. My relationship with the Lord was very, it wasn't as dynamic as it is now because um, I was I was trying to live a very structured life in these all of these areas, and I
Mhm.
put God in a box to a great extent. He was
Okay.
my Wednesday night, Sunday morning, Sunday night friend, and then when we did VBS or we had these other events, we did backyard Bible clubs or whatever it was, and I always supervised that stuff. Um, it was just part of the schedule. I put him in as part of the schedule. My morning devotion, 6 to 6:30. My this and that and the others. You know.
Mhm.
Um, And don't misunderstand me. It wasn't that I wasn't walking with the Lord. It's that it was very superficial because I
Okay.
was almost too busy with
Yeah.
all the other things to make it deeper.
Okay.
Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until the kids got a little bit older, I realized that they saw my relationship with Christ as just part of the schedule and
Okay.
not as dynamic as I would have liked for them to have seen.
Hmm.
And so we had some long conversations about that, and I had to really repent about that and make sure that the Lord understood that I let the kids know I love Jesus. I
Hmm.
do. And if I've given you the impression that he's just a click off the clock, that's not good. That's not good. Now, everything we did in our home and in our school, um, the Lord was a part of.
Hmm.
Because we taught Bible history as part of world history, and we prayed every day for the things that we were studying, and we prayed for our relationships, and we prayed for other people, and it wasn't like it wasn't like our faith was not integral. It was, but if I have to be honest, I think the kids knew there was something shallow about my relationship with the Lord because I felt like I had to keep it looking all together.
Okay.
I was in a church with a lot of other home educators. They all
Mhm.
seemed to have it all together.
Did they?
Their kids were all cookie cutter perfect, and mine were not, and neither was I.
Right. Did
And s-
you ever find out if they really were or if
oh
they,
no, they were all screwed up just like we
yeah.
were.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. They were all
I feel
screwed
like
up.
that's just the way it is, right? Everybody is just
So,
thanks
so
to everybody else. Got
I
it.
went through a phase as my kids got older. Now, um, and I write about this in my Bible studies. My kids had their own baggage to bear.
Mhm.
Adopted children, and then we adopted them at birth.
Okay.
But adopted children deal with abandonment to a different level than even what I did, and I was abandoned. So,
Mhm.
um, so there was some baggage that had to be for them to carry. And when they got older, it began to rear its ugly head in rebellion, and we kind of got shunned from some of the homeschool groups and stuff because we weren't walking we didn't have a lifestyle that looked exactly like everybody else's good, godly Christian homeschool lifestyle.
No.
And what I realized was everybody's got their own row to hoe and everybody's got their own path to take. He
Mhm.
chose me to be the parent of these children for a reason. And at the time, I couldn't have told you what it was. If it was supposed to be so I'd have patience, it was not working. Uh, so so my path was my own, and I realized that. But I also realized at that time that I was spending an awful lot of time comparing
Mm.
myself to other people. It really is the death of contentment. Don't do it. You are gifted with the gifts you have from God. He's the God of the universe. He knows why he gave you those gifts. He knows why he made you who you are. Don't question it. And
Mhm.
don't be afraid to be authentically what he's created you and your family to look like around other people. That's their business. You
Mhm.
can't control what they think of you, right? You can only
Yep.
control what's going on in your own home with the Lord. And sometimes you can't control that. And so I just tell people, man, be yourself and don't feel like you're not. I tell this story. I went to a retreat not too long ago, and in the middle of the retreat, I was extremely quiet. And I know that you know me well enough to know that that's almost impossible. But during this retreat, I was really feeling this burden of, I was feeling this burden of having such a big personality that I was going to be a hindrance to what God was calling me to do with the message of freedom in forgiveness. And it was so difficult and so hard to just think of myself as just not right. You're just not right for the job. God's
Mhm.
got this calling, but it ain't for you. You're just too muchness.
Yeah.
And that was exactly how I felt. And by the time the retreat was over, I had two people come to me and tell me they wanted to pray over me and they didn't know why. But God was leading them to do that. And not only that, they anointed me. And there were just, it was just an amazing experience.
Mhm.
What it taught me was God's going to give you the encouragement that you need to do the things that He's gifting you to do.
Yep.
And you don't need to look at what He's doing in someone else's family with their school and with their plans and with their businesses.
Mhm.
This is your path. He walks beside you and ahead of you and behind you,
Mhm.
prepare you the way for the Lord, right? He goes
Yep.
ahead of you. And and you just can't compare, don't be afraid to be yourself, and be really honest with your kids. There were several times with my kids, we would be in the middle of something, especially math. A lot of times I just say, wait for your dad to get home. Dad'll be home soon. He can take that. Um, but there were times when I just had to look at it and it might be something that I wasn't catching on to as well as, social studies and history and science and reading. And man, I'm the grammar queen. I could do all of that. But there were some things I would look at and I just have to go, you know what, guys, you're gonna have to give me a day to work on this. And then I'd
Mhm.
either hook up with another homeschool mom or I'd get online or I'd talk to my husband who might already know something about it. And then it was fine. But remember, the goal is to teach them to look for the answers. So
Yep.
when I just set that as an example, I just, you know what,
Mhm.
guys, I don't have the answer for this one. Let's look at it together. Let's figure it out together. Or wait till dad gets home. So so yeah, I was not I was not as good at letting my children know that I needed more of a tighter relationship with the Lord.
Mhm.
But as we've gotten older, I think they've understood the attempts I was trying to make was to, be like the other homeschool families and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And finally, when I went through this epiphany of, oh, guess what? You're not like the other homeschool families. I cut my hair off and spiked it red and went to the homeschool convention wearing leather pants.
I
So,
love it. Did you make some friends? I feel like I'd be your friend at that.
okay, so I love this story. This is just so funny. This is how hypocrisy in the church, right? So I went to a homeschool convention and a friend of mine had set up a booth. She had this fantastic new planner. I'm going to do a video on that someday. Uh,
Okay.
she had this fantastic new planner. It's called the Flexible Planning System. And I loved it. And she had set up a booth at the homeschool convention. This was a large homeschool convention. We had like 500, 600 vendors, big event.
Wow. Yeah.
So I went in early while she was still setting up her table, and she had a little friend helping her. And the day before, I had cut my hair off and spiked it red. I mean, it was bright red, bright, scary red.
Yeah, I believe that. Fire engine red.
Do you know me?
I like it.
That red, right? Okay. So, but that was my mood. I mean, that was exactly who I was. I am the Christian drama queen. I am that, right? So, and I was just coming to grips with the fact that I didn't want to be in a box and wear a denim jumper and kids everywhere,
Mhm.
which was the homeschool uniform in the 90s.
Okay.
And so I, donned my leather and spiked my hair and walked through the homeschool convention. And this little friend of my friend who set up the booth leaned into her and said, look at that hair. She didn't know I heard her. But when
Yep.
I turned, my friend went, oh, it's you. And she was all excited to see me. And her little friend felt about 2 inches tall
Oh, I'm
because
sure.
she had obviously judged me based upon my appearance, right? And not what I had to offer.
Yep.
And my friend just began to rant, was just raving about me and my kids and how I was teaching her this and that and the other and how we'd been together for months and years and whatever. And but I realized that you might not think other people will judge you,
Yeah.
but you can't control what they think. You have to be authentically you and ask God to, I wasn't trying to necessarily be the center of attention, but I kind of was. Does that make sense? Like I went when I spiked my hair, it's like, ooh, I really like this. And then I realized they're gonna hate it. And I don't care. So,
You were
so
such a
anyway.
trip. I love it. Okay,
So
so you've talked several times about like these women or other homeschool families
yeah.
that we're not doing it right. Well, at least
We're doing it the same.
weren't doing it the same and had some things to say about you about it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But can you talk about community in your life? You obviously had some friends that didn't care that you had spiky
Mhm.
red hair, right?
Yeah.
So what was the importance of this type of community as you were going through this season of your life with younger kids and homeschooling and
Right.
the busy craziness of all the stuff you had?
I think that if it had not been for some of the older women of the church counseling me, even when I hadn't asked,
Hmm.
I probably would have lost it because there were several times when I remember specific incident. There were two or three of us sitting at the back of the church after a Sunday night, and I had a toddler, and he was kind of crawling all over everything on the pews. And he reached for something really sharp, like the pencil at the back of the pew that they put with the visitation cards and all of that. He
Hmm.
had reached for that, and I went to take it from him, and he got very, very upset. And the older woman next to me, and I mean, she was probably in her 60s or 70s at the time. Oh my goodness, I'm almost as old as she was. That just hit me. It did not hit me well. It's okay. But she leaned over to me and she said, Lisa, give him something else. And so I got my keys off the pew and I handed him my keys and
Yep.
he just let go of the pencil.
Yeah.
I never would have thought of that. I just would have thought, be the mean mom, take away the pencil, right?
Right.
You're trying to
Yeah.
you're trying to keep him safe. And so, and but you know what? I've done that and practiced that ever since with every kid. They want something, I give them something else if that
Mhm.
something's not good for them, you know?
Yeah.
And and that even happened as they got older. They wanted to go into something that I didn't feel like was a very safe choice. And I would
Yeah.
say, you know what? Have you ever played golf?
Right.
You know, have you ever played volleyball? How about t-ball? How about baseball? How about pass, punt, pass, what is it? Kick, punt, pass, punt, and kick, whatever that
I don't know.
NFL does this little thing with kids. It's called
Oh.
pass, punt, and kick, pass, kick, and punt. Anyway, but all of my kids did it. Right.
Yep.
Um, so I used that technique of they're doing something not so safe. Let's show them something let's,
Mhm.
squirrel on purpose,
Yep.
right? And
Yes.
so the older women that were willing to, they had already been through that young phase of trying to fit in, even though
Mhm.
they weren't home educators. They were young moms and they weren't always doing it right. And they probably felt like that, they were never going to do it right.
Mhm.
And so for them to come to me and say, "You're doing okay," was huge,
Mhm.
huge. And I did have some homeschool moms that just, when I'd say, "Oh, I feel bad because we're not doing such and such," and it seems like every other family is focusing on such and such. And I did have several that went, "Well, you're not doing it now. Maybe you'll do it in a few years. Just let it go. You've got it's a 12-year journey for each kid, man."
Yeah.
So it is important. I will tell you, as I have gotten older and because of technology, I mean, COVID showed us a lot.
Mhm.
If nothing else, and I could do a whole podcast on that, but if nothing else, it taught us we could create some genuine fellowship with people in Ireland if we wanted.
Yep.
And in fact, one of my new best friends, Ireland, 5 hours ahead of me. She's another podcaster and she homeschools. And so we've just kind of connected. And, I did a show just like this one with her. But uh, she uh, it- we found a way to connect with people and find like-minded friends and whatnot and get encouragement. We
Mhm.
have greater access to like-minded, encouraging Christian friends or Christian women or Christian fellowships. We have more access to that than any time in history.
Mhm.
And I think that we don't take advantage of it because we still play front porch friend is what I call front porch friend. Have you ever heard of that? If
Mhm.
if you go and see all the Facebook posting about how great everybody's days are, it's
Oh,
like it's like seeing the front porch of the hoarder's house. The
yeah.
front
Okay.
porch looks great, but
Yep.
inside is all this turmoil. And so those front porch friends are, you can't compare what's going on in your household with the one great picture of the front porch that they've shown
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely.
Don't do that. And so So I tell people, be extremely authentic. But you don't have to impress me.
Mm-mm.
We had a conversation about that before we started today.
Yes.
Be authentically you. I want to see your mess because
Hmm.
I think I'm more trustworthy when people see that I'm just as messy as they are, maybe in another area.
Yeah.
But if I let you know that I'm a mess sometimes, the description of my podcast is be a lover of Jesus, but live like a hot mess all the time. That's exactly what I do. And I think that's what most women want the freedom to be able to say they're doing too. Because how do I strive for a closer walk with God if I'm constantly trying to imitate a closer walk with God that doesn't exist?
Yes.
So you got to be real and say, I'm really struggling with this. So I told a lot of
Mhm.
moms back in the day, I'm really struggling with how come you and your family have these 8 wonderful kids that seem to be perfect, and I got a 12-year-old that's wanting to drink Dimetap as a Kool-Aid drink because he decided to try drugs for the first time. I mean, I didn't understand what was happening. Why
Yeah.
why was this not going well with mine? And it was, oh, and again, then that was when they would say to me, well, what you don't know is, you know,
Yeah.
little Susie has gotten on the internet and found some stuff she shouldn't have, and I can't get her away from the computer. So everybody's got stuff. But
Yes.
you find those people that are okay with your stuff. And if you can't
Yes.
find people that are okay with your stuff, call me. I'm okay
Right.
with your stuff,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Um, you need to have I can't grow in the Lord if I can't get with other believers and say I'm having trouble growing with the Lord.
Absolutely.
That's the why we don't forsake the assembling of ourselves together, because we're discouraged. We go through seasons of really rough doubt and anguish and fear and all of that stuff. And we need other believers in our life to go, you know what? Been there, done that, bought the t-shirt,
Hmm.
and here's how I got through it. That's what Second Corinthians 1, 3, and 4 is all about. You've got all this comfort from God, and now give it to someone else who needs it,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Hmm.
So I don't even remember what you asked me, honey. I've chased a
That's okay.
rabbit.
I did. I was asking you about community and how important it is, and I
Okay, good.
totally agree. And I agree. I think that people want to know that you're safe because you're willing to tell them your mess, so
Mhm.
they feel like they can tell you theirs, right? And so that's a trustworthy thing. Like, she's not perfect. I can tell her I'm not either.
That's right.
That's really nice to have people in your corner who
Yeah.
are
And if
willing.
you don't already have people in your life, if everybody in your life is perfect,
Well, they're
I,
not, but they're lying, and
yeah, I had a,
you need some
the,
new friends.
right, I had a pastor friend of mine who said, if you find the perfect church, don't join it because you'll ruin it.
Right? I know.
And it was and there, because everybody's got stuff.
You
It's,
guys got
you
stuff.
know,
This is something before I had really any friends that were Christians. I asked the Lord to send me some, and you know what? He did. And now I have a ton. And so if you are struggling with finding friends that love the Lord and are
mhm,
genuine, just
mhm.
ask him. Ask him
Yeah,
to send you some. He'll and then
you
don't be
will.
afraid when they show up. Just
Yep.
talk with them.
And I actually have recently started using a social media outlet called Threads, which I guess is Instagram's version of Facebook different. I don't know.
It's like Twitter or
Yeah,
X
it's
or whatever
like,
you call it.
yeah,
Yeah.
which I don't use. So
No.
I'm not, I don't do X,
No.
literally. But but what I'm finding on there is like, it's like overrun with believers that are
Really?
like looking for genuine fellowship. So if you type in there, algorithm, and then the things that you're looking for, Christian entrepreneurs or Christian women or homeschool moms or people need planning or whatever, uh,
Okay.
then all of a sudden you'll start getting followers that are interested in the same things that you are. So you can kind of build your own little network of people to support and encourage. It's been very interesting to watch.
Okay. Well, that is good to know.
So yeah,
Really good to
it's
know.
just another tool. I offer, I have little friends that I pray with every morning that we're nowhere close to each other.
Yeah.
I don't have we live out in the middle of Kansas.
Hmm.
We live in an area that is predominantly one denomination that we are not.
Yep.
Not that I don't have fellowship with some of those people, and I do, because I can still love them and they still love me, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not
Yeah.
a denomination person. But as far as deep fellowship, we don't see them very often because that's not where we attend church. It's not, and so a lot of my church time is spent online with other people doing Zoom church. Let's pray together. Let's talk
Mhm.
about this together. Let's just, build one another up. And I have found that my podcasting friends and the people that I'm finding as I build the ministry have been like, man, just a godsend. And I did just ask the Lord to send those people to me.
Right?
And so this network is just getting crazy for me right now. And I wasn't expecting it, but man, God's hands are all over it. And I just love it.
That
It's
is,
very humbling.
yeah, absolutely. That's amazing. I love it. All right, so we're gonna start wrapping it up. First I want to know, is there anything else you want to share about anything we talked about? Any type of encouragement that you want to tell young or well, they don't have to be young, but moms with younger kids. I'm not young, that's why I say it like that. I'm not a young mom. I'm a mom with a young child. I'm
Oh,
34.
yay.
34 is not young to have your first kid. So,
Okay.
yeah. But any moms with younger kids who are trying to run
Um,
businesses and trying to, just do it.
I think that there was a time as like I said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. There were several times in my journey as a home educator that wanted to do more entrepreneurial stuff
Mhm.
that I talked myself out of doing things.
Okay.
Because I would think, I don't have the time, I don't have the energy, it's not for me, somebody else can do it. Looking back, you only live once. I
Mhm.
say you jump. If the more it sounds impossible to do, but you have a drive or a passion to do it or build it,
Mhm.
I say jump.
Okay.
You'll get all kinds of bumps and bruises on the way down,
Yeah.
but you don't want to look back 10 or 15 or 20 years and go, man, I wish I would have jumped back then.
Mhm.
So jump. I think that life is just too short to not take some chances. Especially if you have a passion for it. Like now anymore, I'm an obnoxious fanatic about toxins in the home. I'm just obnoxious, literally obnoxious.
We should have a conversation about that because me too.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm not what they call crunchy, but I'm pretty crisp.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I have become really, because I've seen what just removing chemicals from our home has done for us. We
Mhm.
were a family that was on antibiotics every 30 days. And we went from that, all the kids being on antibiotics at different times, to nobody being on an antibiotic ever. And I mean, except maybe an ear infection.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
so that was a pretty huge, substantial change for us. And um, but 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 there have been times when I had passions for things that I felt like were really important, and I could have just driven a little harder or a little faster and talked myself out of it because I was just too busy.
Yeah.
I think we all have the same, what is it, 86,000 seconds a day or something?
I don't know how
Yeah.
many.
And if that's the case, use a few of them to feed the passion that you've got and jump. Get- You know, I'd rather take a chance and fail forward than quit or not try. So,
Yeah.
so jump. I
I
mean,
love
I've got a brand new business that I started. I'm 59.
it.
And I started to grow the other business, the cleaning business.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
I've,
have.
I've doubled the receipts in that business in the last year.
That's incredible.
It's absolutely insane. But, when you put the right processes in place and you decide that you're going to love God and love people, you can do
Mhm.
it, right?
Yeah.
So I say jump. Take your chances and jump. But when you have passions for things, you know what else? It's
Yes.
okay to take some time off and just love on your kids.
Yeah.
If you want to take 2 weeks off in the winter or the summer or the fall or every single season,
Yeah.
you take that time off and you enjoy your kids. And because they're going to grow up and they're going to leave. And your job, you're working yourself out of a job from the moment they're born.
Hmm.
So don't waste, don't think that the book learning is more important than the time with your kids, because it's just not true. Find something you can all love together and go do it. A friend of mine decided when her kids were teenagers, they were like 13 and 15 and 16, three girls, they would all start doing dog shows. And so
Oh,
for 20 years, all them kids did was dog shows. And they did
I did
school.
not see that coming. I did not see the dog shows
Did
coming.
not see the dog show, but they fell in love with it
All
and
right.
they raised puppies and they ran their own business
Yep.
and they traveled the country together as a
All
family
right.
and they did school on the road.
That's perfect.
And it was just but she was trying to find something for them to all love together and there it was.
There it was. They found it. That's amazing. Yes.
They have fantastic memories of that. And if they had talked themselves out of it because quote we have to do school, man, I can't imagine what they would have missed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the great example of how like all homeschools are different, right? You're talking about that earlier. Like everybody who does it at their house is
Yes.
different. And that's cool.
Yes.
That's so great. That's the
And
beauty of it.
I would say, and I'm sure I've got other things to say. But I would say, depending on where you live, it is probably more critical for you to home educate.
Mm.
We live in a very rural area. Most of my teachers are God-fearing, Bible banging, going to church every Sunday believers.
Yeah.
They they know my standards and I know their standards, and most of the time there's no conflict. But if you're in a larger metropolitan area, I like saying metropolis because I think it's Superman. But anyway, if you're in a larger metropolitan area, a more urban setting, the standards that are taught in school may not be what you want your kids to be learning.
Yep.
And it's becoming more and more critical that you really know what's being taught where they're at.
Yeah.
So I have always believed that whether you decide to put your kids in public school or private school or at home, you're responsible for your child's education,
Absolutely.
one way or the other.
Hmm.
Okay. And I also think it is a moral issue. People can think it's not, but for me, once I was convicted to teach the kids at home, it began, to not do that was sin to me, just like the scripture talks about. To him, it is sin.
Yep.
For me, because of the conviction, it was sin for me not to do it. And I wasn't going to let fear make me commit that sin of omission by not teaching my kids. So, if it's not your thing and it's not your calling, I would say just be as active as you possibly can be in their education,
Yeah.
whether
Absolutely.
it's public or private or co-op or whatever.
Mhm.
Because, if you're not called to it, one way or the other, God will get you through it. So, but just it's between you and him, and don't let other people guilt you into teaching this way or doing that thing, or that's between you and him. But I do think he's going to have me answer for it. I mean, I think at some point he's going to say, why didn't you do what I told you? Or good
Yeah.
job, good job, faithful servant. So, it's very individual. It's very personal. The idea is, um, the way you teach. There are some good books I recommend. The Way They Learn by Cynthia Tobias is a good one. Things We Wish We'd Known, which is a book by several veteran homeschoolers from back in the
Okay.
90s, and they talk about things they wish they'd done differently. It's a great book. Great book. And yeah, look for me if you've got questions. I mean, I'm an
Absolutely.
open book.
So tell us where we can find you, where people can find you. And if they
Oh,
have questions for you, where should they go to ask them?
I'm everywhere.
Well, tell us,
Uh,
where do you like people to find you? How about that?
Oh,
Your
well,
favorite?
I love getting feedback from my podcast. I do a 15-minute podcast every week called Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen. It is where I talk about my story of redemption and other people's stories of redemption. And at the first of the year, I'm going to start talking about homeschooling and some of the stuff that we went through as home educators. But that can be found on almost any platform. I'm on iTunes podcast. I'm on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music. So just look for Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen. And I'm on Buzzsprout too. So if you just want that link, you can look that up. Also, if you have want a free resource to determine whether or not you have to deal with some bitterness or you feel like, maybe you want to have that conversation, go to freedom.christiandramaqueen.com and there's a free resource there and you can kind of go through that, fill that out, and then you're connected with me from that point on, and you can hit me up anytime to talk about whether or not you want to get a discovery call with me, and we can just kind of talk about your past and whether or not we need to deal with some abuse issues or just some regret and that sort of thing. My mission is to walk people through that process of going from being bitter to being free to forgive those that have victimized them and maybe help them find a way to be grateful for painful past, because that's possible. But it's a journey and it's not something that we do lightly. I don't take it lightly. I'm really humbled by the fact that God wants me to help other people do that. But it is a process. And so people can just ask me questions about that at freedom.christiandramaqueen.com or
Yep.
just shoot me an email. If you want either one of the studies that I offer on Amazon, Discarded is a daughter's journey to reclaim freedom and forgive the father who left her behind. And then a Christian victim's guide to forgiving the unforgivable. But if you get them from me, I'll spiral bind them for you. So they won't do
I
that at
love,
Amazon. I'm,
I
I'm so spoiled about the spiral binding thing.
like the spiral
So
bind.
Lisa at christiandramaqueen.com. And you can find me on YouTube, same name, Christian Drama Queen. And you can even see my podcast in video form there. But I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, the
You're
Christian
everywhere.
Drama Queen. I told you, I'm everywhere.
Really are everywhere. Okay. Well, I will link your resource and your podcast and anything else you want me to link. I will link all those things so that people can find you wherever is easiest and best for them.
Oh,
Definitely
excellent.
want them to connect with you. Thank
Excellent.
you so much. This was so good.
Oh, I've
I'm so
had so much
grateful that
fun.
you were able
I
to join me.
I could talk this stuff all day. It's a good thing I have a podcast to release some of that energy because I could talk all day about what God wants to do with us, and
Mhm.
the homeschooling's part of it. So
Absolutely. Okay, Lisa. Well, I appreciate you and we will talk to you soon.
I appreciate you. Thank you.